welcome to Healthy Eating, Active Living Milwaukee. And before I introduce you to our guest, I want to tell you about earthbound gems, who are these gems that surround us. And these gems, we call them gems because they're earthbound, and they let light shine that keep us focused and give us direction. And today, our guest is an example of that, Dr. Gary Sherman, who is an alumnus of the Pennsylvania School of Medicine. And of course, I lose my screen as soon as I start talking. And having had a rewarding career practicing restorative and cosmetic dentistry for 36 years in the New York tri-state area, and being a cardiac patient for 21 years, he now lives a strong and productive life with a left ventricular assist device. But that's just the tip of the iceberg. He's also founder of the seminar webinar presentation enterprise known as Heart to Heart Consulting LLC. His unique and captivating programs entitled The Heart of the Matter inform, educate, and entertain everyone in the health community and lay audiences as well. Welcome, Dr. Gary Sherman.
Wow, thank you for that mouthful, Marvin. I'm humbled by that introduction. Yeah, I mean, I'm just trying to do my thing and do what I love, which is to communicate people, kind of share my experience, which at this point I can do, being 65 and having lived a really extraordinary and interesting life. I hope that my experiences can shed some light on some people who are going through some stuff. And many of those people, by the way, are going through stuff that's much more challenging than even I have been through. But through those experiences, I've lived a rewarding life. So it's really opened me up to people that I've met that are extraordinary. So I'm thankful for all of these steps that I've had to take.
Oh, that's great. That's great. If you could tell us just a little bit about you and about the why you chose to reach out, because a lot of people are as I heard people say before, there's a difference between elders and old people.
Yeah.
Old people sit on the porch and tell people to keep off the grass. Well, elders will come out and strike up a conversation with the kids on the block.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. You are
Yeah.
obviously an elder.
Yeah, well, it's funny because I spent 36 years as a dentist and dental surgeon, and a lot of that time, kept pretty quiet except for my conversations with my patients, of course. I had a good relationship with my patients, but I always liked to want to tell stories. My dream as a kid was to be a comedy writer, and my mother said, "Well, you can do that, but you got to be a doctor first." So.
So mamas and their priorities.
Yeah, and so we sort of go along with those things when we're young, and we're lucky enough to have a little guidance, whatever that is, and hopefully it lands us in a pretty good place. And I'm thankful for that career. But the storyteller in me was always there, and now. At an older age, after my dental career is over, I'm getting to do what I always wanted to do, which is to share my stories. And having a sense of humor, especially in the face of challenges in your life, is really important. And being able to share your ideas and your stories, because it really allows people to realize that they're not alone in their journeys. I started out after I couldn't practice anymore because of my illness. I had congestive heart failure, which is not the death of the heart. Congestive heart failure is the inability of the heart to send enough oxygen to the rest of the body so that you can function normally. And so that for most people who get congestive heart failure, the symptoms are difficulty breathing, difficulty lying down to sleep, because the fluid backs up, gets congested in the lungs and the heart. And it's an alarming disease because those are very uncomfortable symptoms.
Yes.
So it's not typical in terms of what people think of. You have a chest pain and you have to run to the hospital. It's not like that. In fact, quite frankly, I don't think I've ever had a chest pain. But when you have loss of the left ventricle, unfortunately, the only thing that you can do at a certain point after medications have stopped working, and sometimes those medications, by the way, can work for several years. And today, the medications have improved so much that they can actually be effective for people with congestive heart failure for many years. But there comes a point at which the medications are not effective. So you're getting these symptoms, no matter what you're taking, it's still a drag to be able to walk up a hill or even a flight of steps. And so at
Yeah.
that point, you need a heart transplant. And coming to realize that is a, that's a crossroads in people's lives. So, for yourself, for your spouse to hear the words, you need a heart transplant, obviously that's alarming. The first time you hear that, it's pretty alarming. And so the first time I heard that was probably in 2015 or 16, when one cardiologist finally said, you have to go to a heart failure center, you need a heart transplant. And so that's when my journey in this phase of my life began. And I went through a number of hospitals, finally arriving me at a place where I was having the opportunity to have a heart transplant. And I won't keep you too long on that, but it didn't work out several times already in my life. But I do have a left ventricular assist device, which is this extraordinary mechanical device, mechanical circulatory support, which helps the heart do what it's supposed to do. So the motor helps that left ventricle to push out that oxygenated blood to the rest of my body, so I could do most normal things. And it gave me the opportunity in the time that I had it to start a speaking career. Originally, I was speaking on stage on issues of congestive heart failure. And then COVID-19 hit, and all my in-person meetings dried up because we weren't allowed to have gatherings,
Right, right.
At that point, I had an opportunity to become a supervisor for New York State contact tracing for COVID-19. Another extraordinary experience in helping people to make phone calls, contact tracers, to help people to understand that they have to quarantine in order not to spread the virus, COVID-19. That was a big challenge, and you can imagine in downstate New York, trying to tell people, A, that they have to stay home for 2 weeks, and B, that you need all their personal information.
Oh yeah, that went over big.
Yeah, that went over big. So the good news was that I had studied persuasion and influence throughout my career as a dentist, because it was important for me to make my dental patients even understand the benefits of treatment when there was a lot of reasons they could come up with for not doing it, money and fear and pain and all that stuff.
Sure.
And so I've learned to have those communicative skills. And now I was in a position to actually share those skills. So I started with congestive heart failure. I started the podcast as a whim, just because I thought it would be a good adjunct to what I was doing. I started writing a book, which I promised myself that I will finish. But the podcast sort of resonated with the global health community because I was sort of a bridge. The doctors were able to, they wanted to get their messages about these complex issues about heart disease and kidney disease and liver disease to the public in a way that they could understand it, and found me to be a vessel, through which that could happen, because I'm sort of a bridge. I can explain these complex issues in a way that lay people understand it. I also have the perspective of not only a doctor, but as a patient as well. So, I kind of understand what makes a good doctor and a good nurse from the patient's point of view. So I feel the pain on both sides of that. And for that, I think is the reason that the podcast is growing and I'm able to reach so many people, and that they'll listen because they know that I connect with them on either side of those issues. And so
Yeah.
I'm so thankful because it's growing so rapidly. So then it started out in heart disease because I knew most about that. But now through the podcast, I've gotten to know about kidney disease and liver disease and lung disease and mental issues also. And these are all connected.
Yes.
It's all one thing. And living donation and in addition to deceased donation, there are living donors for kidney transplant and other parts of the body that actually people do altruistic donation for, which is extraordinary. These are people who donate their kidneys to strangers. I mean, what's more selfless than that? And
Yes.
so and so now I was put in a position through the podcast, The Heart Guy Presents the Heart of the Matter, to be able to enlighten people, to show people they're not alone in this journey that they're in, and in a way that's really safe, and easy to access because it's free,
Yeah.
and you can listen in your car and you can listen. So the medium, the podcast, is really wonderful, to be able to share all of these messages that are important. And so I think that gives you an idea of what I've been doing. So I hope that answers
Yeah.
the question.
It is. No, and it certainly did. It's just amazing that with all the leaps and bounds that have and success stories that are in donor organ donation, it still seems to have a stigma when you say it to someone, or even when they're filling out the driver's license application, and it asks you, do you want to be an organ donor? And I know friends that either skip it or say no,
Yeah.
and just right off, and without giving it any thought whatsoever. Um, how can we grow past that or push past that, and especially in the African community, we tend not to want to do it at all unless it's a blood relation.
Right. So I actually have a keynote that I've given, which isn't that long. It ends up being about 45 minutes altogether with a back and forth afterwards. The presentation itself is probably on 15, 20 minutes. But the title of it is basically why people choose not to donate their organs, right? So,
Ah,
so what is behind that? Why do they hesitate when it comes to doing something that's so extraordinarily generous? Even the notion of donating your organs after you die. I mean, who wouldn't
right.
want to do that? You're going to be not going to be alive anymore, and to know that you will give life to another person after you die seems like something that people would want to do. Yet most people don't sign on the line, right? So
Mhm.
what is that all about? You're
Exactly.
right. You're right. It's cultural. It's religious also, but there's most cultural and religious communities, it's misinformation, because the leaders of most religious communities advocate the organ donation. They believe in it and they advocate it. Now, it's not to say that there aren't some extreme religions that don't advocate it because of certain religious beliefs, those still exist, but most absolutely do. So there's misinformation with regards to that. The more powerful thing is that because most people are not touched in any way by somebody who needs a new organ, it's kind of rare. It's not like cancer where most people know somebody who's had cancer, right? Most people don't know anybody who's needed an organ. So where do they get their information? They get their information from TV and movies,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and so they rely on Grey's Anatomy and stuff like that. Not to badmouth Grey's Anatomy in particular, but it's just most of these television shows and movies that portray the removal of organs in a negative way, and for that it creates fear and uncertainty. And so that's where a lot of the hesitation goes, because that's their source of information. So a lot of the efforts now are to make those messages in TV shows and in movies to be not only accurate, but positive. Because when they're accurate and positive, more people will tend to donate their organs. But
Yes.
but if they don't know anything other than what they see on television, well, that's their basis for their knowledge. So a lot of it is that. There's also something called the ick factor, where it's like just people don't want to deal with anything having to do with death and organs, and there's that fear, if you will, of those types of
Yeah.
things. It's the same thing, when people fear to have an injection or their blood taken. There are plenty of people, intelligent people, wonderful people that fear those things, and so it's very easy to just walk out of the motor vehicle bureau without having signed on that line.
Mhm.
So they call that the ick factor, actually. So there are as many as 10 reasons, different categories of reasons why people haven't done it. On the other hand, there are many people that have done it, but the problem with that is that that's not the only issue why people don't get organs. Um, the challenges that are presented to be able to get a transplant in kidney or heart is very multi-leveled, in the fact that there's financial reasons. there's insurance, there's you have to have enough money to live near the hospital to find a, if you're not near the hospital center where they're going to have you have a transplant, well, you have to pay for housing, right? So who's going to pay for that? So there's so many issues around and barriers, as you mentioned, in the more vulnerable communities where people don't have the wherewithal, number one, and they don't have the access or the financial capabilities of getting a transplant. So there's a lot, even if there are centers in their own neighborhoods, it's getting the information about how do I go about doing this? How do I go about getting healthy enough to get on a list so that I can get an organ? Because you have to get on the list first before you can even think again on. So there, you're right. I mean, it is such a complicated system that keeps people from being able to do this, and sometimes they give up because they don't know what to do.
Yes, yes, I can see that. You mentioned about being able to be in close proximity to the center or from where the replacement will actually take place.
Right.
The Cathy House, for instance, here in the Milwaukee area, which is part of the Frederick hospital system, is one of those places. And what can you tell us about that?
Okay, so you can see Cathy's house is right behind me, and it's not real because that's just a picture. But I'm inside there. I have a room inside Cathy's house, and you can see from the outside what an extraordinary facility this is physically. It's a brand new facility. And right behind that, if you look in the distance, you see the hospital. And that's just a block and a half away. So I can actually walk from Cathy's house to the hospital for my appointments. And the reason that I'm staying here now is because I am waiting for a heart transplant again. It's not the first time I'm waiting. I've waited before. I'm waiting again, and I'm staying here because I have an extraordinary opportunity to receive a heart at Frederick because of a program that Dr. Joyce is leading that allows a patient like myself to get a heart. And so I won't get into the details of that because that's complex. But to get back to Cathy's house, inside that house, there are people, both hired and volunteers, and hundreds of volunteers that come to that house to support patients and caregivers who are going through very serious illnesses in the Milwaukee area, and specifically at Frederick, and also St. Luke's too, but I think most of it is at Frederick. But these are all people that come from outside the Milwaukee area who are living in Cathy's house temporarily so that they could be near the hospital. When you get a transplant, leading up to the transplant, during and after, you need to be near the hospital because there are tests that have to be run to make sure that you are, one, qualified to get an organ transplant, and that includes bone marrow transplants for cancer patients as well. To do the tests and then come back home, because sometimes as a patient, these things wipe you out. You're tired during those treatments. It's not an easy thing physically. And so it's not practical to be far from the hospital. In the case of a heart transplant, after I get my transplant, for 3 months, I have to come every week for a biopsy to make sure that to the hospital to make sure that the organ isn't being rejected. So it's imperative that you have housing that is near the hospital. Now, we have Cathy's house here in Milwaukee. There are very few of these facilities in the country. I think there may be 4 at this point. This is the model for what could be available for hospitals to house patients and caregivers that need this kind of help and support. This is an extraordinary place. And as I suggested, the people who work here are so special people. They take a personal interest in everybody that comes and goes through this house. And I am a witness to that because I live here. But most of the country does not have this kind of facility. And if they don't have it, so how does a person who's thinking about getting a heart transplant in, let's say, the Bay Area in California, for example, Stanford, that area near Stanford, for example, which is one of the best transplant centers in the country, housing is expensive there, So
imagine, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, it's again, this is again one of the challenges. And we're and Kathy's house, I should say, going to your area of expertise, they don't only support somebody by giving them a room, they provide food and other, supportive things in the house. You can have your linens and everything is right here for you. So you have comfort, you have meditation rooms, you have exercise rooms, you have food that comes available. A lot of charity groups come and cook inside the house and make dinners for us once a week, or
Mhm.
drop off bag lunches. I mean, it's extraordinary the support that comes, all from donations, from businesses, and a lot of the money comes from the hospital as well, certainly, to have built this house and maintain it in a way that supports these patients. So yeah, how lucky am I? I mean, it's extraordinary how I came from New York for treatment here. So I came from a long way away and I'm staying here. And I feel like I've been living here for, it's so comfortable that it's very easy to stay here.
Well, that is great. That is good to know. Uh, one last thing we'd like to touch on is that so as once your transplant is completed and you go through the 3 months of testing
Exactly.
and checkups, then your life becomes your own again, and you look, and I'm sure you're looking forward to those days and back to the U.S. Open and other events that take place in New York City.
Yeah, and thank you for that. And I do, of course, and I want to get home. New York is my home. My friends are there. My two
Yeah,
sons live there, and I want to see them in person. But having
sure.
said that, fortunately, because of the computer and Zoom and meetings like this, I am in touch with other people, and so
Oh,
I
that's
don't
great.
feel lonely at all. Being here, I'm not only in touch with the people that are in the house, but I'm also in touch with people remotely. And through my podcasting, by the way, I have thousands of listeners that have become, many of whom have become my friends. And so it's far from being lonely for me. I'm so lucky. Yeah,
Well,
the thing about it, though, to your point, is after the 3 months, though, I still received a heart. And you could kind of say receiving a heart or an organ is sort of like having a baby born, right? So
hmm,
I'll always have to take care of that baby.
yes.
Even though I don't have to take as many in-person appointments with the doctors, or as frequently. It may be only once a month, or maybe only once every 6 months.
Hmm.
But I still have to take medications, and I have to do things that are going to be pointed towards taking care of my heart, because I have to honor the gift that
Yes.
that family or that individual provided me by signing on that line, right?
That is a great way to put that, honoring the gift.
Yeah. So
Yes.
I have to honor that gift. I got to take care of it. So that will
Yes.
never end. That will never end for me as long as I live. I'll be taking care of that gift.
Okay.
So I might not do it here. I might be doing it in New York, but wherever I am,
Mhm.
and fortunately, my hospital back in New York will be doing the follow up for me when I move back. Um, so there is this, co-therapy that's being done, and the sharing between hospitals of patients like myself, which is extraordinary too. A more collaborative approach towards medicine, where hospitals are actually sharing patients.
Yes. Yes. That is great to see that that is opening up across the nation
Yeah,
and hopefully eventually globally.
yeah,
Because it's one global community anyway. Um,
exactly.
if you could give us the information again. Of course, we'll be showing your podcast information on our screen, plus in our other literature that we'll be presenting following this up, along with information on how people can get involved as a volunteer or donation work with the Kathy House.
Oh
Uh, if,
yeah,
so if you could just give us that podcast info and we'll go
yeah,
from there.
yeah. So it's really, so the name of the podcast is The Heart Guy. I'm the Heart Guy. The Heart Guy presents the heart of the matter is the name of the podcast. However, and so if you have a podcast network that you listen to, like Apple iTunes or Spotify or Google Podcasts. There are a number of them available, and some have their favorite. And so if you just type in "The Heart Guy Presents the Heart of the Matter," my little red emblem will show up. But the easier way to do it is just type in your browser on the top of your phone or your computer, theheartguyspeaks.com. Just those words. You don't need any wwws or anything like that. Theheartguyspeaks.com is the podcast website, and it brings you right to all of my podcasts, all of the episodes that I have on there. I think I'm up to about 40 that are in there. So,
Right.
and those subjects, those guests are providers. They're transplant directors, doctors. They're also patients. They're also caregivers. There are donor advocates. There are people who have invented things that help people who are ill. So I have people from all walks of life as guests on my podcast. The common thread is that they're all giving back to the global health community in some way.
Yes.
And that's really what my podcast, my particular niche, if you will, my area is designed to do, is to have people that are giving back to the community. That's how I've designed it. So The Heart Guy Presents the Heart of the Matter. If you want to find it easily, theheartguyspeaks.com, all one word, in your browser, and it's going to magically come up right on your phone or your computer. The nice thing about now the other thing about podcasts is that many of us, especially us older people, haven't really done podcasts. We don't really know that as well. It's really so simple, though. You can think of it as a radio show, but it's a radio show that you can always go back to. So you don't have to be in there at a particular time. Once it's recorded, because it's recorded, you can listen to half of it, and then you can go back and listen to the other half. My programs generally go about half an hour. And so, like a TV show length, and that's manageable. So it's not like 3 hours you have to sit there and listen. Mm-hmm. But even if you only have 10 minutes, you can listen to part of it and then turn it back on when you're ready. So podcasting, I think, is going to become the way people send their messages out in the media. I think it's taken over radio. So it's a wonderful way to go. And it's all free for listening. You can listen free to any podcast you want on any subject you want. And podcasts can be found on your device. So whether it's a computer or a phone. As far as Kathy's House is concerned, if you want to take a tour, Kathy's, it's KATHYS-house, HOUSE.org. And if you put that in your computer, you'll come to their website, which has a virtual tour of the house. There's a real good video in there and several other videos. And also, of course, descriptions of how Kathy's House came about, the history of it, who's important there, and how to donate. Certainly how to donate to Kathy's House if you can do that. And that is well appreciated. And I certainly would have you do that. So there's a couple of new things that you can do. You can listen to our podcast, so you can also learn more about Kathy's House. So thank you for that opportunity, Marvin. I appreciate it.
Oh, you're more than welcome. Well, Hill family, you have it from the Heart Guy. Thank you so much, sir.
Oh, you're welcome. I look forward to seeing you again.